Be the first to know when we release a new webisode. Sign up to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or to receive our email updates. See details at www.hivtalkshow.com.
Well, I definitely agree that when doing HIV prevention, we need a holistic approach. So looking at the people spiritually, looking at the community, looking at not just the behaviors, but as Corky brought up, the mentality, the mental health and things of that nature. But I also think that there are a lot of people who have a lot of self-worth who engage in risky behavior, and it's not because they hate themselves or perhaps conflicted internally. However, we need more options. We need to give people more choices, because we know that when people have more choices, then they are likely to reduce their risk.
That's very wise.
I really appreciate Kevin saying that, and Corky too, and I would also add and offer that, you know, I think we make a lot of assumptions about the epidemic, right? One of the assumptions we make is that if we scare people to death, that they'll, you know, act right, that they'll, you know, use condoms. And I think what we should have learned from the 80s is that, you know, fear-based messages don't work. I want us to create campaigns that are based in love. Like, we want you to make these choices because we love you. We're not trying to scare you to death. You know, we're not gonna show you these pictures of penises and vaginas with holes and sores and things. You know, we try to scare people into behaving, and we know that that's not gonna work.
Right.
I think we need to create messages that are rooted in love and affirmation. And the other thing that we assume is that it's people that are positive that are going around not using condoms. And we also know in the literature that that's not the case. It's people that don't know their status, that might have higher viral loads. And to me, that suggests that we have to make testing as efficient and as available and as accessible as possible. And it might mean that we might need to look at home-based testing. We might need to look at rolling out HIV testing in even more venues besides community-based organizations, because we want to make sure that everyone has access to a test. And we want to make sure that everyone has access to their HIV status, because knowledge is power. And when people have knowledge of their status, even in literature it shows that when people know that they're positive, they're less inclined to have unprotected sex. So I think that's really important.
College campus, are the college students talking about HIV today?
Not really, and I think that would actually, I'd add that to the cacophony of things that have already been said. I think another big parity in HIV prevention is just that it has the candid conversations are not being held. I recall a situation probably about a year ago. One of my very best friends and roommate, we were having a conversation. He said, you know, like, I had unprotected sex with this guy, and it was just, I guess the assumption is that, you know, we're all educated individuals, you know, who are well equipped with the tools and resources, you know, better know-how of how to, you know, engage in, you know, safe sex practices, and for someone to so, I guess, blatantly kind of, you know, I guess elucidate that they're not. It really took us all aback, and we really reamed this guy, right, for not doing that. But what that said for me, what it brought up was like, this is the first time they've ever had this conversation with this person or with any of my friends about, you know, the ways in which we engage in sex and intimacy. So in my experience, you know, particularly at Morehouse, but I'm sure it, you know, it reaches across campuses wide. I just don't really feel like the candid conversations between people who matter, you know, are taking place when it comes to HIV, you know, and AIDS and prevention. I think it's one thing to have a, you know, conversation with your partner that you're about to engage in, or, you know, partners, however you, you know, however you engage in that. But I think it's another thing, though, for friends, family, you know, coworkers, peers, colleagues, that it needs to become more ubiquitous, that conversation. It can't just take place in the bedroom.
So let's go back to that scare tactic that you were mentioning. Anya, do you agree with that?
Partially, not completely. I think that there is a space where people do need to be fully aware of the dangers of contracting HIV. It's not a walk in the park, and a lot of times we see in magazines for HIV medication, you know, the guy is buff and smiling, and that's not, that can be a reality, but that's not the only reality, particularly if you don't get proper health care and it's not properly managed. So I do think that, you know, pictures of, you know, dicks falling off and stuff like that needs to be seen, and maybe that doesn't have pictures of genitals falling off needs to be seen, but that, you know, that doesn't have to be the only tactic, but I don't think that we should take that off of the table.
And I guess that's because not everybody receives everything the same way.
Exactly.
You know?
And what I was going to offer is the fact that, keeping in mind, in no matter what space I tend to be in, and I just had these conversations with a group of individuals that range from 23 on down to like 20. One just got out of a relationship with the individual that he found out was positive, and they were engaging in certain practices, but the things that deterred him from wanting to confide in most of his other friends about the severity of the relationship was, no matter how enlightened that we fancy ourselves being, if you cannot step outside of your comfort zone, and yeah, I can be concerned for you, but I know that some of what's going to make you draw back from receiving anything I need to say is that moment of judgment. And so we have to really be conscious of, it's okay. We all gonna go through those moments where I don't care if you never had a unprotected sex moment, but I'm gonna keep it to myself because I don't know how that's gonna make you feel. And so what I have learned throughout my experiences with working in community is that no matter where I'm at with certain things I may or may not have indulged in, I cannot impose that how you should know, no, because if you knew better, or even if you didn't, whether you did or didn't, you made a decision. Now at this point, we need to tackle it from a perspective where you can feel like you can move on. They have gotten tested since then and they still test negative, but that's what I'm saying, like there is a pocket of individuals that receive both of the messages, both positive and negative. But when it boils down to it, we still keep coming up with this disparity no matter what the gamut is from HIV to heart disease, because we talk about it, but the professionals, the agencies, the advocates, the people that are on even in the trenches like myself, we have to be more cognitive about our own approach to the people that we're serving and not coming with an air of judgment. I come with that air when I'm in spaces with other professionals, because it's like, how dare you not, meet the people where they're at, and then you wonder why they're not even listening to you. I'm not telling you you need to be out there smoking crack or smoking weed or having unprotected sex with them, but you need to understand what their situation is, the severity of it, and then by talking to them just like any other friend, they will receive some of the messages. May not be everything that you want them to receive, but some of it where they can start accessing these services just in case, if they feel like they need to access it. And that has always been one of my kind of draws with me serving community. I'm not going to give you that judgment. If I know you're coming to me to receive information, I'm just going to take that out the window. Now, when I'm in the space with other girls that, and when I mean other girls, that's my gay vernacular for other professionals out there who fancy themselves to be out positive and don't, give a damn about, how that whole gender typing thing. So I'll use terminology like that. But for the most part, I try not to be in too many spaces with those individuals because there's an air of judgment. And how can you say that you're doing community work and you talk about approaching things from this whole perspective if all I'm hearing in your tone is judgment? And I can only imagine how that's going to be received by the people who are listening to you. Yeah, I'm listening to you, but I feel like I'm being judged, so it's going to go in one ear and out the other.
I think it comes from us trying to make HIV prevention messages into this slogan or into this very overly simplistic sort of message. Like, I think it's easy to be judgmental when you try to package everything into this slogan, right? I think, and to what I would offer, and even connect it to what Anya was suggesting around, like, how do you mediate letting people know how serious HIV is, but at the same time not sort of creating conditions where when folks still convert, they think that they're out in the wilderness. Like, how do you mediate that? I think part of that happens with just providing information, right? Just provide the information. I think a lot of HIVs just become HIV prevention messages. Again, it's become like they look for slogans. Just do it. Put on a condom. Yeah, and it's like
I love
you really
myself.
can't. It's far overly, and it's. I think the behavior, desire, pleasure, like those things are very complicated things. Like philosophers have been arguing and debating, and it's since the early start of the Western civilization. Like, it's just not something you can just package into this neat little box. And so I think ultimately what has to happen is that we have to educate people and trust that if we give them the information, that they'll make the choices that are optimal for them.
Be the first to know when we release a new webisode. Sign up to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or to receive our email updates. See details at www.hivtalkshow.com.